All right, welcome back. Once again, I'm Annalisa Ventola. I'm the founder of Public Parapsychology. I'm here with Alex Álvarez, and I'm going to invite you, Alex, to re-upload your presentation because I think we lost it on the way from the backstage to the stage. Anyhow, Alex is going to be speaking to us with a presentation titled "Is Gaia Alive? Overcoming the Machine Conception of Life."
Okay, thank you very much, Annalisa, for the presentation. Well, first of all, I have to say that after watching Jack's presentation, it may seem that we previously agreed to on the topic of the talk, but that's not what happened. It's just a coincidence. But I have to say that the topic of this talk was well, I was inspired by Jack's book Greening the Paranormal, which I read a couple of months ago, and I have to say it's an amazing book. Well, I'm giving here a similar but different perspective, and well, let's begin. Well, uh, oh, okay. First of all, there are a couple of issues that we have to address before going to the core of the talk. Uh, we need to distinguish different kind of systems that are important for biology and ecology. Those are physical, chemical, biological, and living systems. Physical systems are an aggregate of physical objects and concern not only the parts, but the interactions between the parts. They can go from a very small system like the atom to a very complex system like a machine, for example. We then have chemical systems, which are mixtures of different chemicals that comprise a network or set of interacting molecules in which there are chemical changes. And then we have biological systems, which are not the same as living systems or living beings. A biological system is a network, or comprises a network of interactions that connects different biological entities or living systems. For example, our digestive system, although it's composed of living cells, if we take it away from us, it's not considered to be alive, but it's still a system, a biological system. So, and living systems, on the other hand, are equal to living beings or organisms, and they are defined as an open, self-organizing life form that interacts with its environment. They have several hallmarks like compartmentalization, growth and division, the processing of information, specifically genetic information, energy transduction, and adaptability. And the most basic living system that we find is the cell, which can be either a bacterial cell, a prokaryotic cell, or an eukaryotic cell. From it ranges from unicellular organisms to each of the cells that compose our body. And well, the other thing I like to briefly discuss before we go on is that it is believed in many areas of science that systems can be broken down into smaller parts, which are easier to describe, and that by doing so, we could further explain the more complex system. This is precisely what um, well, it's called reductionism. which is a philosophical view that is very useful, for example, in the physical or in the chemical science. But when we go beyond the levels of biochemistry and or the level of molecular biology, reductionism begins to be unsustainable. And when we are dealing with sociological, economical, psychological, or ecological issues, uh, it no longer sustains. Uh, we cannot explain the phenomena from these branches of science with a reductionist approach. We need a more holistic approach. But reductionism has been applied to the study of living systems for centuries, and it is precisely uh, what led to something that we call the machine conception of the organism, which is a metaphorical description of the organism as a machine. And according to this view, living systems are nothing more than a very elaborated and complex physical system. It has resulted very useful to explain the function of the different parts of organisms, but it offers an incomplete and erroneous view of living systems. And it is perfectly exemplified by the Vaucanson's dog, which is considered to be the first automaton in history. It was a mechanical dog built by Jack Vaucanson that could eat kernels and simulate a digestion process. And then it had in a separate compartment some restored feces, and they were expelled into the environment with this by this structure that resembles an intestine. And Vaucanson believed that someday we would be able to build automatons that were indistinguishable from living beings. And well, we today we think that this is perhaps something impossible, but it is the core of disciplines like synthetic biology, which aim to build a living cell just from scratch. Now, in my personal view, I think this will never be achieved uh, because organisms uh, are not properly machines, although there could be some similarities. And this conception of life can be traced back to René Descartes. When he was studying the nature of human body, he proposed that we were made up of two different substances: a material substance that led to that it was the substance that responsible for the body, and an immaterial substance which created mind. And according to his view, mind was exclusive of humans, but humans were like machines, but complex machines plus mind, and animals were nothing more than complex machines. And this conception dominated the discussions for about 2 centuries, all discussions on the nature of life or on the nature of organisms. And it was until the 19th century when naturalists began to think in evolutionary terms that the organism stopped being considered some sort of machine, and it reacquired a central role in biology. Evolutionary biology provided an integral view of living beings and also a framework in which all life was temporally connected through relationships of ancestry and descent. And it was Charles Darwin who believed that all life that exists today and all life forms that had existed through time were connected in a temporary fashion, and they descended from a single ancestor. And this view lasted for about a century until the middle of the 20th century, when it was discovered the structure of DNA was discovered and molecular biology was born. Then this led to another reductionist view of life, but not in terms of the parts of the organism, but in terms of the genetic component. So what mattered now was not the organism itself, but the genes and the proteins. And it was believed that if we could understand the mechanisms uh, of genetic processes, we will ultimately understand life. But more recently, this reductionist view of organisms and of life has been challenged by different branches within biology. Specifically within evolutionary biology and developmental biology, we assume that organisms are like machines. Well, it implies a teleological vision of evolution and of development, which this goes against the recent discoveries within those fields, and also within cell biology. Novel state-of-the-art techniques that can track individual molecules are showing that cells do not behave as micro machines. And this is very important because it was believed that, perhaps multicellular organisms could not be considered as machines because they were too complex, but cells could. They were considered to be the most basic living machine. So this might sound contradictory. But with these novel techniques, the opposite has been shown, that even cells do not behave as machines. They do not have a predictable behavior. So, I would like to explore more of these characteristics that distinguish organisms from machines, but I don't have a lot of time. So I will only say that many of the traits, if not all the traits of machines, depend on the designer or the maker of that specific machine. Whereas for organisms, all our traits are intrinsic to the system and are dependent on the system itself. And if you want to know more about this, I recommend reading a philosopher of science called Daniel Nicholson, who has treated these themes. So you may wonder, why did I said all of this about the machine conception of organisms, of life, and how does it relate to ecology. Well, if we assume a mechanistic view of life, there are many implications in different areas of science in general. And but let's focus on the implications for consciousness studies. Uh, First of all, if organisms are nothing more than complex machines, well, so consciousness is nothing more than an emergent property of the brain, or an epiphenomenon, a product of neuronal activity. And also that there is no connectivity beyond the ecological context, which uh, comprises the flow of matter and energy, and the transfer of matter between different organisms. For example, when we're looking at food chains, that is considered a biological system, but and there is all the interconnectivity that can be, but deeper connections between humans and between humans and other living beings, and also between humans and the planet, are well, are discarded. And also psychic abilities are impossible because two brains cannot establish connections, well, physical connections. They can't also receive information from, if not by the five senses. But I think the most pernicious problem is that if we assume ourselves as a dominant species, a complex machine plus mind, we also assume that we have the right of exploiting all of Earth's resources. We do not see the Earth as a biological system, but we think that all of its resources could be regenerated after some time. And this has deep implications on climate change. I want to focus on four of them. For example, if we when we deforestate a forest, for example, we kill a lot of trees, and the environmental conditions of this specific region begin to change. But we also kill a lot of animal species. And if one of these species happen to be endemical to this area, well, it can become extinct. And also, as people begin to settle in this area and build houses and factories and well, other kinds of constructions, wasted, we begin to produce a lot of waste, and pollution becomes an issue, and it is specifically chemical pollution, which can go to the underground and kill a lot of microorganisms that live there. And well, although we do not see them, microorganisms like many bacteria are very important for biogeochemical cycles. And if they are killed, well, these cycles can be disturbed, and the concentration of, for example, different gases that go to the atmosphere can change, and well, this ultimately results in a major change of environmental conditions. But what I want you to see is that all of these scenarios are interrelated. They are not separate consequences, but they come from a massive exploitation of resources. Well, and well, this is the last part of the talk. I look at the Gaia hypothesis, which is a hypothesis developed by James Lovelock in the 60s. And well, it is not currently well accepted in mainstream science, but I think that if we pay more attention to this hypothesis, it can lead us to a mitigation of the negative effect that we are causing to the planet, and help some environmental problems. Uh, Gaia is the number of a Greek, sorry, the name of a Greek goddess, uh, and is the name that Lovelock used to refer to Earth. And, it was defined as a complex entity involving the biosphere, atmosphere, oceans, and land, and that constituted in its entirety a feedback system that seeks an optimal physical and chemical environment for life on the planet. According to this hypothesis, Earth's crust and the atmosphere comprise a closed system that self-regulates itself. But and this is the important part. In mainstream science, it is accepted that it is the planet which modifies its conditions, and that the biosphere, organisms that inhabit here, only adapt to these conditions. But according to the Gaia hypothesis, it is the biosphere itself which self-regulates the conditions of the planet so that conditions are suitable for all species. They have an active role, which goes against the mainstream view. And the most important factors, according to this hypothesis, are temperature, atmospheric composition, and ocean salinity. But this is only the chemical part. Lovelock was a chemist. He also wanted to collaborate in a NASA project. But it was his colleague, evolutionary biologist Lynn Margulis, who expanded on the role of organisms in for the equilibrium of the planet. And she identified microorganisms in different biogeochemical cycles as essential to keep the system in balance. And she also proposed that there was not only a coevolution between microorganisms and multicellular organisms, or between different multicellular organisms, but also a coevolution between organisms and their environment. There were they evolved together, and she actually did not believe that the Earth was alive. She considered that the planet was an interactive system whose components are living beings. But well, this is also different from the mainstream view that she considers Earth to be well, nothing more than a physical aggregate of different components. In other terms, kind of a machine, a huge and very complex machine. But the question is still open. Uh, could the Earth really be considered a living system? Well, let us compare some traits from the Earth itself and multicellular organisms in order to try to answer to this question. Both multicellular organisms and the Earth are composed of biotic and abiotic elements. Both self-regulate, and in both systems there is an interdependence of elements, and also a crucial role of microorganisms. In fact, if we killed all of the microorganisms that are within our body, we would instantly die. There are also more bacterial cells within our body than well, human cells. One difference is that multicellular organisms, or any kind of organism, cannot nourish from its own waste. We take our food from outside, from the environment, and Earth as a closed system, well, it can nourish from its own waste. This is an important difference between organisms and Earth. But perhaps the most interesting feature here is, does the planet have some kind of consciousness or some kind of mind? Because, well, multicellular organisms, at least humans and animals, and perhaps every multicellular organism seems to have some sort of consciousness or proto-consciousness. But can we say the same about our planet? And I think the answer may lie in what we call extraordinary encounters or extraordinary experiences. And this is something that Jack mentioned before. When we look at the narrative of many UFO encounters, for example, we find many warnings about the current environmental crisis. But the narrative has actually evolved. If we look at the testimonies from people during the Cold War period, we find a lot of encounters that included a message about the risk of nuclear annihilation, for example. But in recent years, this narrative has shifted towards message warning on deforestation or on global warming. So this is a very interesting point. And also, in the 90s, Kenneth Ring interviewed a lot of people that have had UFO encounters or a near-death experience, and he found a correlation between well, the encounters and a shift towards planetary welfare and ecological concerns. And he elaborated on a theory proposed by Michael Grossos in the 80s called the mind at large theory, that postulated some sort of Earth or global consciousness that could be sending us signals. And this mind at large or Earth consciousness could be responsible for revelations in both near-death experiences and UFO encounters. But something I've been wondering about is, how could the Earth, well, if this is actually true, how could the Earth be sending these signals? And I think may have something to do with the Earth lights hypothesis, which was developed by Paul Devereaux in the 80s. He studied well, all over England different UFO sightings, or what we call the lights in the sky. And he found that different manifestations of the UFO phenomenon seem to be the result of different geological, meteorological, and psychokinetical processes, and also other environmental processes that interact with the human mind in unknown ways. He also found that these sightings were linked to ancient or megalithic sites all over England, and it seems that this could be the way Earth is trying to communicate with those people, uh, because well, these encounters also comprise the narratives that I mentioned before. On people receive some advice or some warning on the current ecological crisis, and so UFO experiencers, but also near-death experiencers, could be considered like modern prophets, or like unconscious shamans that could lead humanity to planetary regeneration. And I think this very particular phenomena, these air lights, are the way that Earth manifests and tries to communicate with us. And well, we have reached the end of the talk. I just give the conclusions of it. So the first thing is that well, living systems or living beings are definitely not physical or chemical systems. There are living systems, and they can be reduced to simpler systems. So in this way, Earth resembles an extremely complex biological system, which may or may not be alive, but it is much more than merely a physical or chemical system. And also some sort of Earth or planetary consciousness may be acting as an intermediary in many of the revelations in those who have extraordinary experiences. And precisely these transpersonal or extraordinary experiences seem to be a catalyst for the awakening of a greater concern for the care of the planet and all the beings that inhabit it. And I think this is something ufologists, parapsychologists, and consciousness researchers should pay attention on, because these narratives could inspire many people, and society's concern for when society becomes more concerned about planetary welfare, this could foster future collaboration between environmental sciences, which are considered to be hard sciences, but also with consciousness studies. And well, I think I just wanted to thank you for listening to this talk.